Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller TV series named Channel Zero Season 3 and Season 4. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The first story, titled Butcher's Block, begins with a guy in fat telling a girl named Alice about an urban legend from the area. According to the legend, a young couple was doing graffiti on a street near an abandoned factory called Peach's Meat. The factory once belonged to the Peach family and was later converted into a park. While exploring, they stumbled upon a white staircase leading to a white door. The boys sensed something was wrong and tried to leave with the girl, but they got separated while running away. The boy was then brutally killed by a dwarf wearing red. This is just one of many legends about the Butcher's Block, the exact community where they live. The chubby guy warns Alice never to stop and look at the white staircase if she sees it, never to approach it, and certainly never to go up it. Alice is applying for a job as a social worker in this community, and the chubby guy is the current social worker. As they chat, Alice mentions she has an older sister named Zoe who hasn't been well and needs to take medication regularly. The scene shifts to Alice and Zoe driving to the house they're renting. As they arrive, a strange woman suddenly approaches them. Alice, with her noticeable gap-toothed smile, and Zoe, with her bold red lipstick, assume this is their landlady. However, the woman seems mentally unstable and tells them that their home is safe, but other places aren't, especially the park, where people might tear them apart and devour their smelly parts. She then asks if they have scissors so she can cut off the bandage on her hand. Just as the sisters are thoroughly confused, the real landlady emerges from the house, revealing that the strange woman isn't the landlady at all. The landlady reassures the sisters that the strange woman is mostly harmless, as long as she doesn't get her hands on any scissors. The landlady, a retired journalist, now spends her time creating animal taxidermy. Alice's job is to help local families navigate tough times and improve their relationships. But why did the sisters move to such a creepy place? It turns out they have a mother who once did something terrible to Zoe, and she's now in a psychiatric hospital. Alice chose not to tell their mother about the move. The next day, Alice goes on a home visit with the chubby social worker. On the way, he explains that the area is known as the Butcher's Block, once famous for Peach's Meat, which thrived until its founder, Joseph Peach, mysteriously disappeared, leading to the shop's closure. The streets are now covered in eerie graffiti. The chubby guy warns Alice never to come to the Butcher's Block alone, especially at night. When they arrive at the home, Alice notices a little girl in a red coat, identical to the one worn by the creature from the legend. The girl's mother has been accused of abusing her, and Child Protective Services are considering removing the girl from her care. The chubby social worker and Alice are sent there to investigate. The mother insists she's innocent and that the injuries on her daughter happened while playing in the park. Alice notices that the mother's nail polish is yellow. Despite the mother's protests, everyone assumes she's guilty. As they talk, something seems to be licking the wall behind Alice, making her feel a chill down her spine to her smelly butt. Feeling uneasy, Alice stands up and heads to the next room to investigate. In the hallway, she hears strange noises coming from the walls. When she enters the little girl's room, the girl tells Alice that she found her red coat in the park. As they talk, Alice becomes increasingly aware of something moving within the walls, making her even more frightened. She calls the chubby social worker over, telling him there's something inside the walls, but he doesn't believe her. As they discuss it, the room's door suddenly slams shut and the little girl vanishes. At the same time, they hear the girl's mother scream from outside. The chubby guy breaks down the door, but when they rush out, both the mother and the girl are gone, though the mother's cigarette is still burning on the sofa. They call the police, and a police officer and his partner arrive. The officer dismisses the situation, assuming the mother took the girl and ran to avoid Child Protective Services. After a quick look around, the officers leave, recording the incident as nothing out of the ordinary. After Alice returns home that evening, she tells her sister about the strange events she encountered earlier in the day. Alice is convinced that the disappearance of the little girl and her mother isn't as simple as it seems, especially since she felt an ominous presence in their house. Determined to investigate further, the sisters drive back to the girl's house. As soon as they arrive, they are confronted by the same crazy woman they met before, only this time she's holding a pair of scissors. The woman immediately tries to stab Zoe, forcing the sisters to rush inside the house for safety. Suddenly, Alice remembers the little girl mentioning the park. She decides to check it out and asks Zoe to wait for her at the house. While Zoe waits, she notices a dwarf dressed in red outside. Without thinking, she follows the dwarf into the park. Meanwhile, Alice encounters an old man who introduces himself as Joseph. He tells her that the land used to belong to his family and that he lives nearby. Joseph Peach was the name of the owner of the famous Peach's Meat. After sharing this, the old man disappears quickly into the woods despite being old. Zoe, on the other hand, follows the dwarf to the center of the park where she sees a white staircase. The moment she lays eyes on the staircase, she has a vision of a terrifying creature. The dwarf, now standing at the base of the stairs, turns to face her, revealing his grotesquely deformed face. He picks up a meat hammer and advances towards Zoe, who is paralyzed with fear. Just then, a door at the top of the stairs opens, and a skinless figure emerges. The dwarf turns and retreats back into the doorway, and as Zoe regains her senses, she realizes that the staircase has vanished. The next morning, the sisters reunite outside the little girl's house. Alice had been waiting there all night for Zoe. They return home, but Zoe feels increasingly uneasy and wants to leave the area. However, Alice is determined to stay, leading to a heated argument between the sisters. During the argument, Zoe says something cryptic that Alice is the same age she was, the same age as Mom was then. She asks Alice if she's scared she'll end up like her, and tells her to control her fear or it will consume her. Alice insists that Zoe needs her, but Zoe replies that it's Alice who needs her. This seemingly puzzling exchange will later prove crucial as the sisters face even greater horrors. In the end, Zoe decides to leave on her own, taking the bus. Feeling down, Alice goes downstairs to chat with the landlady. The landlady, a former journalist, reveals that she once investigated the disappearances in the butcher's block, including the case of her own brother, who is still missing. She believes the Peach family is somehow involved in these disappearances, though the entire family supposedly vanished in 1952. The landlady speculates that some members of the Peach family may still be roaming the area, continuing their murderous ways. Joseph Peach, the founder of the meat shop, was known to be a religious fanatic. When Alice looks at a photo of Joseph, she realizes it's the same old man she saw the previous night. But the landlady remarks that if Joseph were still alive, he would be around 130 years old by now. Meanwhile, Zoe arrives at the bus station, dragging her suitcase behind her. As she waits, the same old man approaches her and strikes up a conversation. It's Joseph Peach from the photo. He warmly introduces himself to Zoe and wipes his stinky mouth. The scene then shifts to Alice, who is anxiously trying to reach her sister on the phone, but to no avail. The landlady, noticing that Zoe hasn't returned, becomes concerned and decides to retrace their steps from the previous day with Alice. They first visit the little girl's house and then head to the park where Alice encountered Joseph. Alice tells the landlady about her strange encounter with a man who seemed to be Joseph Peach and asks about the Peach family's disappearance. The landlady explains that the Peach family had ties to a mysterious religious group since the 1930s. Things became even stranger after Joseph Peach's two daughters were mysteriously murdered, leading to a series of disappearances in the butcher's block. In 1952, workers entered the Peach family's home and found something disturbing, prompting the locals to burn the house down. The park was built on the site afterward. As they talk, Alice spots a dwarf in a red outfit, the same one from the beginning of the story. She watches as the dwarf and the man in the suit enter the white door. Alice, frightened, approaches the door but is overcome by a powerful force that knocks her out. The staircase and door vanish. Sometime later, Alice is awakened by none other than Joseph Peach himself. He immediately questions Alice about her faith and her belief in God. Alice, unnerved, tries to leave, but before she can, Joseph cryptically tells her that her sister is safe. When Alice turns to ask more, Joseph has disappeared without traces of his smell. Alarmed, Alice returns to the landlady and they decide to call the police. Unfortunately, the same dismissive officers from the previous day respond to the call. When Alice tells them about what she saw, they remain skeptical, with one cop even finding the situation amusing. Frustrated, Alice thinks to herself if this is really how cops are supposed to act. The landlady shares her disdain for their attitude. Luke, clearly indifferent, casually mentions that his father is the police chief, an entitled legacy officer. With no help from the police, Alice and the landlady return home, only to sense something is off. They soon discover Zoe inside the house, but she seems completely different. Zoe tells Alice that she's been cured. Alice is skeptical, knowing that Zoe's schizophrenia couldn't have just disappeared overnight. But Zoe insists she's better now and that she met someone who healed her, although she doesn't remember the details. She explains that something was influencing her, and now she's cured. Alice becomes increasingly frightened and tries to convince Zoe to leave with her, but Zoe refuses. She wants to stay, believing she can now take care of Alice if she ever falls ill. The scene shifts to the mentally unstable woman we met earlier, who is rummaging through trash. Suddenly, the creepy man in the suit appears behind her and tries to grab her sexy body. The woman runs for her shitty life and encounters Luke. Although he's an entitled officer, he knows he has to act when witnessing such an attack. He quickly apprehends the man in the suit. Interestingly, the man seems to recognize the cop named Luke and remains unfazed by his arrest. When asked for his name, the man reveals that he is part of the Peach family. Luke doesn't recognize him, but Alice and the landlady would, as his face matches the man standing beside Joseph Peach in the old family photos. Luke, still unaware of his true identity, takes him to the station and locks him in a holding cell. That night, the man in the suit deliberately provokes another inmate sharing the cell with him. He coldly provokes the inmate that he's just a waiting source of energy. With that, he begins to undress, saying he doesn't want to get blood on his clothes. In the middle of the night, Luke arrives at the holding cells for a routine check. When he reaches the cell of the man in the suit, he is horrified by what he sees. The man is completely naked, devouring the internal organs of another inmate. Luke is paralyzed with shock, unable to process the gruesome scene. Soon, a swarm of police officers floods the area, including Luke's father, who is the police chief. The chief tells his son that this case is special and will be handled by another agency. Luke is skeptical, sensing that something is seriously wrong. How could one inmate end up eating another? His father, noticing his son's emotional reaction, points out that he's different from his brothers, more sensitive and prone to emotional responses. He then orders his son to take a few days off to rest. Luke, however, grows even more suspicious of the man in the suit. Determined to get to the bottom of it, he secretly follows the vehicle transporting the man. To his astonishment, he discovers that the man isn't being taken for further questioning or treatment. Instead, he's being released in the park. Luke watches as the man in the suit and an old man who he recognizes as Joseph Peach ascend the white staircase that Alice had reported earlier. Luke is left questioning everything he knows. Meanwhile, Zoe is at home resting when she suddenly feels a mysterious force calling to her. A voice whispers that it was this force that cured her but warns of side effects. As Zoe contemplates this, the landlady's cat wanders into her room. Zoe, seemingly possessed by a primal urge, moves toward the cat as if to devour it. However, the scene shifts, revealing that Zoe has resisted this compulsion. It's clear that the side effect she's battling is a newfound thirst for blood, which she is struggling to control. Downstairs, Alice is discussing the Peach family with the landlady when they hear the sound of a vase shattering in the living room. Rushing to investigate, they find the front door open and a letter on the table. The letter is an invitation to a midnight banquet in the park. Sensing something sinister, Alice and the landlady decide to attend. At the park, they find Joseph Peach hosting an elaborate banquet. The food is plentiful, but there's an unsettling atmosphere. Joseph invites them to join the feast, and the landlady recognizes some of the guests. The man in the suit is introduced as Joseph's eldest son, seated next to his wife. Next is the second son, who is single. Also present are their grandmother and mother, all part of the Peach family. Joseph talks about the murder of his two daughters, who he believes were killed by the people here. Now, with the appearance of Alice and Zoe, sisters who resemble his daughters, he wonders if they should replace his lost children. Alice is horrified and demands to know what Joseph has done to her sister and what this all means. Joseph, sensing her desperation, decides to show her. He transports Alice to a nightmarish mental realm where he performs a symbolic lobotomy, delving into her deepest memories. Joseph uncovers Alice's hidden trauma. Her once loving mother, suffering from schizophrenia, stabbed Zoe. Joseph reveals that deep within Alice's mind lies the seed of the same illness, suggesting that one day she too will be consumed by schizophrenia, just like her mother and sister. Joseph offers Alice and Zoe a choice. They can join his family by ascending the staircase as they remind him so much of his daughters. Suddenly, Alice is snapped back to reality, now mourning. The banquet table before them is piled high with human flesh. A closer look reveals that the remains belong to the little girl's mother, identifiable by her distinctive yellow nail polish. Both Alice and the landlady are overcome with nausea, vomiting at the sight. When they turn back to the table, it has mysteriously vanished. With no other options, they return home, only to run into Luke. His previous skepticism has waned after what he witnessed the night before. The landlady hands him her business card, telling him to reach out if he needs help. Meanwhile, Zoe is at home taking a bath when she suddenly sees Joseph Peach. He tells her to embrace the it within her. But what exactly does he mean by it? As this happens, Alice and the landlady return from the park. Alice's co-worker, the chubby guy, also shows up, concerned about why Alice hasn't been to work in a while. Ignoring him, Alice heads upstairs to check on Zoe. The landlady, however, learns from the chubby guy that he has feelings for Alice. Upstairs, Zoe has been hiding under her covers all day. Alice accidentally notices a large wound on Zoe's leg. Alarmed, they rush Zoe to the hospital, but when they arrive, they find the place eerily deserted, with only a handful of staff around. The doctor explains that government funding has been cut, leaving them severely understaffed, a clear sign that something bad is about to happen. Suddenly, the landlady receives a call from Luke. He confesses that he confronted his police chief father and discovered that his dad was lying and likely knows more than he's letting on. With nowhere else to turn, Luke reaches out to the landlady. He recounts the strange events of the previous night, and the landlady confirms that the people involved are from the Peach family. The chubby guy also chimes in, revealing that years ago people found signs of human sacrifices in the Peach family's basement. Just as they're about to head upstairs to check on the sisters, the man in the suit reappears, shocking everyone. Sensing that something is terribly wrong, they give chase. In Zoe's room, she confesses to Alice that she inflicted the wound on her own leg and even ate the flesh. As she explains, a monstrous figure appears behind Alice. Realizing that her symptoms of schizophrenia are worsening, Alice tries to find some medication to calm herself, but the creature, which seems to be a manifestation of her fractured psyche, follows her everywhere. The creature's jagged teeth hint that it represents another self born from her mental illness. After running in terror, Alice finally returns to Zoe's hospital room, only to find that Zoe has vanished. On the bed, she finds a note from Joseph saying that Zoe has already joined him upstairs and inviting Alice to follow. Meanwhile, downstairs, Luke, the chubby guy, and the landlady continue their pursuit of the man in the suit. During the chase, the chubby guy gets separated and ends up trapped on the other side of a corridor. Helplessly, Luke and the landlady watch as the man in the suit brutally murders the chubby guy. Rather than flee, the man lingers, taunting Luke. By the time Luke captures him, the chubby guy is dead, his greasy throat slit. The man in the suit mockingly drinks the chubby guy's blood, his actions both terrifying and enraging Luke. On the way back to the station, the man in the suit continues to taunt Luke, calling him a stinking rat and claiming that humans are nothing more than protein to him. When Luke asks about the missing little girl and her mother, the man dismisses them as insignificant, more concerned with how good they tasted. Before he can say another word, Luke snaps and shoots him multiple times. The scene shifts back to Alice, who drives to the park. There, she sees Zoe on the staircase being pulled into the white door by Joseph. Determined, Alice follows them up the stairs and opens the door, stepping inside. Turning back to Luke, even the landlady was shocked by his impulsive decision to shoot the man in the suit. But there was no turning back, so she decided to help him. Together, they started cleaning the bloodstains from the police car. Once they finished, they discovered that the body of the suited man had vanished from the basement. It turns out he somehow came back to life. Startled, Luke quickly grabbed a shovel and struck the man in the suit again, right in the hairy chest. To prevent him from rising once more, the landlady and Luke decided to dismember the body. But why didn't the man in the suit die from the gunshot? This might have something to do with the deity worshipped by his family. If this deity can grant eternal life to the family, it might also offer some resistance to physical harm. After cutting off the man's head, Luke made a decision to take the head and confront his police chief father. After all, he believed his father would surely take his side, so Luke brought the severed head back home. Initially, his father was pleased to see his son, but that changed when he opened the bag. Stunned, his father called Luke an idiot. Luke demanded to know whose side his father was on. Instead of answering, his father decided they should bury the body. On the way to the burial site, the father revealed his deal with the Peach family. They helped him become the police chief, and in return, he turned a blind eye to the disappearances in the butcher's block. But he wouldn't be chief forever, and one day they would come to Luke with the same deal. At this point, Luke made a cryptic statement that he's not like his father. The two then arrived at the burial site, where Luke, following his father's instructions, dug a large pit and buried the suited man. But just as he was about to fill the pit, his father approached, swiftly slashing Luke's throat. He then pushed his son's body into the grave and left, grief-stricken. Unbeknownst to him, the landlady had witnessed everything. After the father left, she rushed to the pit and rescued the barely alive Luke. The story then shifts back to Alice, who had entered the door. On the other side, she finds herself in another world, a vast sea of flowers and the Peach family's mansion. No matter how hard she ran toward the house, the distance remained unchanged. Alice began to suspect the house was just an illusion. At that moment, Joseph appeared, telling her that Zoe was inside the house and that Alice must find her way in on her own. He also showed Alice what was growing in this strange place: human limbs. With no other choice, Alice continued running toward the house. Along the way, she encountered a gardener who challenged her to a riddle game. When Alice answered correctly, 3 white doors appeared behind her. The first door would take her back. The second opened into a chaotic, unknown space resembling a surreal world. And the third led to a palace of flies, which seemed to be the entrance to the Peach family mansion. Alice chose the third door to find her sister. Though the gardener seemed like just a gardener on the surface, he was actually a key figure in triggering the next part of the story. Only by answering the riddle correctly could Alice unlock the subsequent choices. After entering the house, Alice once again encountered the schizophrenic entity. The creature with the oversized head cornered her in a room, touching her in a way that caused her memories to jump erratically. A red door appeared in the vision, and suddenly, someone came from behind and killed the creature. It was Joseph. He told Alice that this creature represented her illness, schizophrenia, and that he could help her eliminate it completely, but only if Alice agreed to a pact by saying, "Cut off its head." Meanwhile, Zoe, inside the house, was having a tough time as well. As mentioned before, Zoe had been struggling to control her cravings for human flesh. During dinner, the Peach family members tried to tempt her into eating human meat. Starving, but unwilling to give in, Zoe began cutting flesh from her own leg. From the wounds, it was clear she had been eating her own flesh for some time. The scene then shifts to the aftermath of dinner, where Zoe and the others were waiting in the living room. Joseph then entered, leading Alice by the hand. He welcomed Alice, formally introducing her as a new member of the family. Zoe tried to stop Alice, but Alice ignored her completely. It seems like this is one of those situations where trying to save someone ends up backfiring. After joining the Peach family, Joseph began treating Alice's illness by extracting from her mouth a centipede, which symbolizes her schizophrenia. Later, while wandering around the house, Zoe overheard the Peach family discussing a plan. They talked about sacrificing a young girl and ensuring she wouldn't escape. It turned out the little girl they had captured earlier was still alive. Alice had even seen her when she first arrived. Zoe also noticed the red door, and when she entered, that mysterious entity appeared again. Feeling something was wrong, Zoe rushed to tell Alice about what she had seen. Zoe believed the entity behind the door was the god the Peach family worshipped. She wanted to take Alice and leave, but Alice refused. This scene highlighted the stark contrast between the sisters' personalities. The younger sister, Alice, who had always taken care of her elder sister, Zoe, would rather stay than follow in their mother's and Zoe's footsteps. Alice knew what staying meant, but she told Zoe that anything was better than going insane. On the other hand, the seemingly erratic Zoe was actually the stronger one. She would rather eat her own flesh than someone else's, and each bite caused her pain, keeping her alert. In a final act of defiance, Zoe swallowed the centipede representing Alice's schizophrenia to free herself from her own bloodthirsty urges. Meanwhile, Alice became fully immersed in the world of the Peach family, even helping them capture the little girl who had escaped. After discovering this, Zoe secretly entered the red door and rescued the little girl from the sacrificial altar. She then quietly snuck downstairs while the Peach family was enjoying dinner. By the time Joseph realized what had happened, it was too late. The little girl had been saved, and he could no longer fulfill his promise to the god, who was now furious. Back in the real world, the police chief found the second son of the Peach family and took him to the spot where he had previously buried Luke and the suited man. The chief offered to trade his son's life for the suited man's, hoping the Peach family would let it go. But when they arrived, they found that Luke's body was missing. It turned out that the landlady had saved him and brought him back home. Using her years of experience in taxidermy, she managed to stitch up Luke's wounds. As the two were catching their breath, the second son and a pair of dwarves tracked them down. Just when it seemed like the landlady and Luke were doomed, his police chief father unexpectedly turned on the Peach family, shooting and killing the second son and the two dwarfs. The chief had realized that his son's life was not enough to trade for the suited man's, and since the feud was already set in motion, he decided to go all in and eliminate the rest of them. He then helped the landlady cut off the heads of the 3 dead men. Afterward, the chief planned to take Luke and leave, but Luke disagreed. He wanted to stay and save more people, while his father only cared about protecting their small family. In the end, Luke shot and killed his father. Many might wonder why Luke shot his own father. In earlier episodes, Luke believed that his father would always take his side, but his father had long since betrayed his own humanity to protect himself and his family, even helping the Peach family slaughter innocent bystanders. His father's actions mirrored Joseph's devotion to the god. Both seemed to protect their loved ones, but in reality, they trapped them in an endless cycle of suffering. Luke, however, had a light in his heart. He wanted to put an end to it all. Let's take a look at where the little girl ended up after escaping. After coming out of the door, she hid in a park. It was there that she was found by the mad woman who had appeared earlier. Meanwhile, Zoe made her way back to the landlady's house and recounted her experiences in the mansion. She told everyone that Alice was still inside and revealed that the Peach family was worshiping a god, and their ultimate goal was to capture the little girl for sacrifice. Back in the mansion, the Peach family was in a frenzy after losing the girl intended for their ritual. Joseph mobilized the entire family to search for her. Alice, who was now completely under the Peach family's control, was the first to arrive at the landlady's house, putting her directly at odds with Zoe. Sensing danger, Zoe warned the landlady and urged everyone to escape. There was an old, unused tunnel in the basement of the landlady's house, so the group prepared to flee through it. However, Joseph arrived just as they were about to escape. When the old man saw his beheaded family members in the basement, he was consumed with rage. After placing a handkerchief in his mouth, Joseph began to transform, summoning the evil god. With his new powers, the old man quickly caught up with Zoe and the others. The landlady fired several shots at Joseph, but he was unfazed, his muscles bulletproof. She then asked him if he remembered her brother, who had disappeared in the community many years ago. Joseph coldly replied that he didn't remember, but added that he did recall his taste. Despite their best efforts, the group couldn't withstand the evil forces, and the little girl was eventually captured by the Peach family. The ritual began with Joseph carrying the girl to the church, where she was placed on the sacrificial altar. Zoe and the others arrived just as the ceremony started. As the boss-level evil god was about to be summoned, the mad woman from earlier snatched the girl away. This created a dilemma. The god had been summoned, but the sacrifice was gone. Furious, the god made Joseph and his family explode into onion pieces on the spot. Although Alice had symbolically joined the Peach family, she wasn't truly one of them, so the god spared her. In the end, while the god let Alice live, her schizophrenia worsened. Alice and her mother ended up in the same psychiatric hospital. Interestingly, Zoe, who had struggled with schizophrenia for so long, had fully recovered. The landlady, Luke, Zoe, and the little girl formed a new family and lived happily ever after. The ending of the story is intentionally ambiguous. Where exactly is Alice? Has she truly gone mad? Pay attention to the scene where she talks to her mother in the psychiatric hospital. The painting on the wall resembles the chaotic universe beneath the god's cloak. The mother's smile is identical to the god's expression on the steps. In the final shot, we see Alice taking her medication, but the setting doesn't look like the hospital. If she's in the landlady's house, why isn't she joining them for dinner? As for the origin of the dwarfs in the show, it's implied that they are the offspring of the suited man's wife. The god granted the Peach family new life, but these lives were imperfect. This season marked a significant shift in tone from the previous two, with a greater emphasis on abstract themes, though the emotional core remained unchanged. Joseph tried to sacrifice others to ensure his family's survival, but instead he dragged them into an abyss of despair. In contrast, Luke, Zoe, and the landlady, though not related by blood, shared a common goodness and ultimately found happiness together. The second story, titled The Dream Door, begins with a newlywed couple who moved into their new home and engaged in an intimate moment. 2 minutes later, they finish and enjoy some eel sushi in their bedroom. Tom, the husband, suggests planting some climbing roses in the yard. However, his wife, Jillian, is against it, saying that roses are lazy and insincere. This conversation clearly hints at something deeper. The house was a wedding gift from Tom's mother. Suddenly, a noise comes from the basement. The couple heads downstairs, where Jillian finds a box filled with childhood memories and discovers old photos from when she and Tom were children. It's clear they've known each other since they were young. Tom notices a dog suddenly jump out from the corner, which Jillian assumes Tom bought. She names it Eel. The eerie sounds in the basement continue, and they notice a strange wall, signaling that something is definitely wrong with the basement. As they continue renovating the house, Tom's friend arrives to help. Meanwhile, Jillian meets their neighbor, Ivan, in the yard. Later, at a gathering with friends, Tom mentions finding an old comic strip Jillian drew as a child called Pretzel Jack, a monster character that could twist his body into strange angles. Jillian seems uncomfortable and explains that she was inspired by a contortionist clown she once saw at a circus. In the first few days, life for the couple is going well. However, one day, while shopping together, Jillian sees Tom arguing with a woman. When they return home, Jillian receives a letter from her father, but tears it up immediately. Furious, Jillian confronts Tom about the woman at the supermarket. Tom explains that her name is Sarah and that he used to do some work for her. He claims the argument was simply because Sarah was unhappy with his renovation work. Jillian doesn't believe his bullshit and presses him on whether he had slept with Sarah. Tom defends himself, saying he's not like Jillian's father and that she could call Sarah to confirm that it was just about the renovations. But this raises more questions, making the audience wonder what Jillian's father had done and what's the real connection between Sarah and Tom. At this point, the camera suddenly rotates 180 degrees, signaling a shift in the atmosphere of the show. Jillian and Tom reconcile, with Jillian saying she trusts him. That night, the lights flicker ominously, and Jillian seems to have a disturbing dream, sleeping very uneasily. The next day, a mysterious blue door inexplicably appears on the wall in the basement, the same wall that was previously just a blank space. When Tom asks his mother about it, she insists there was never any door there before. The blue door has no keyhole or ventilation gaps. They call Tom's friend for help, but no matter how hard they try, they can't open the door using any tools. Eventually, the friend brings a gun to try and force it open. When he fires the gun, Jillian covers her ears in pain, the lights flicker wildly, and then everything goes dark. Finally, the blue door opens, revealing a long corridor leading to another blue door at the far end. Unlike the first door, this one has a handprint in the center, but strangely, none of them seem to notice or care about the handprint, a possible plot hole, as anyone would normally be curious about such a detail. The three of them speculate that this corridor must lead to Ivan's house, so they decide to investigate. When Ivan answers the door, he jokingly comments that their late-night visit feels like the start of a horror movie. However, Ivan's basement has nothing unusual. It turns out Ivan is just a tenant, and the landlord doesn't live there. Ivan, who is pursuing a PhD, mentions that doors have significant meaning in psychology. No matter what they try, they can't open the second blue door, not even with the gun. After they leave, Jillian knocks on the door 3 times, but there's no response. However, after she walks away, there's an eerie 3-knock reply from the other side. The unsettling atmosphere grows. Jillian later goes for a therapy session, mentioning that the door makes her feel very unsafe. The therapist tries to delve into Jillian's parents, saying she doesn't need to live in their shadow anymore. Jillian also talks about her trust in Tom, admitting that she secretly checked his phone bill and found that he's been making late-night calls to an unknown number. Jillian confesses that she's tempted to call the number herself. The therapist asks if she still loves Tom. Jillian says she does, but adds that loving someone doesn't mean you truly know them. It's clear that Jillian's trust in Tom is starting to erode. At night, Tom said he was going to his friend's house to play. Jillian secretly followed him and discovered that he went to a strange place. Inside, there was a blonde woman talking to Tom. Feeling conflicted, Jillian returned home. Suddenly, there was a noise from the basement. Jillian remembered the door to the basement. This time, she placed her palm on the handprint on the door, and sure enough, it opened. Behind the door was a pitch-black room. Suddenly, a strange person ran out of the room, startling Jillian. After the strange person ran away, Jillian called the police. She saw her neighbor Ivan nearby and went to say hello. Ivan asked Jillian if she believed that some people or places were very special, not in a supernatural way, but rather beyond current understanding. Jillian didn't quite understand what Ivan was getting at. The next day, Jillian recalled the argument at the supermarket between Sarah and Tom. She dialed a number she had found on Tom's phone bill. As expected, Sarah answered. However, Sarah mentioned that Tom should stop bothering her or she would file a restraining order. At night, Jillian told Tom everything she had discovered and asked if he was harassing Sarah. Tom said it was like when they first started dating. Everything seemed to have problems, and nothing was as simple as it appeared. There were always bigger secrets. He added that he wasn't the source of Jillian's anxiety, but rather it was her moving back here that stirred things up. Tom then left, saying he would get in touch in a few hours. At that moment, the strange figure from the basement flashed past the window. Tom arrived at the blonde woman's house, and she asked if he wanted 2 nights in a row and welcomed him in. Meanwhile, Jillian went to Tom's friend's house, hoping to find out if Tom was cheating on her. The friend reassured her that Tom wasn't lying. He said she couldn't blame Tom for something her dad did 20 years ago. This made Jillian furious, and the lights started flickering again. Suddenly, a hand reached from the corner of the table and took a knife. As the argument between Jillian and Tom's friend escalated, a figure emerged from the door in the wall. It was the strange figure from the basement. Its body stood up at a bizarre angle. Just as the argument peaked, the strange figure rushed forward and stabbed the friend to death, while Jillian stood by in terror, unable to help him. Afterward, the strange figure displayed its ability to contort its body in unnatural ways, resembling the flexible clown that Jillian had drawn as a child. The police arrived at the crime scene, and Jillian claimed she didn't recognize the killer. After the questioning, Jillian went to the basement and found the drawings she made as a child. She started to feel uneasy. Then she encountered Ivan, who suggested setting up a neighborhood watch and asked about the appearance of the killer. Jillian said she couldn't remember. Ivan asked her if she had ever tried lucid dreaming, training her consciousness to control her subconscious. He said sometimes the answers are already in her mind and she just needs to find them. Jillian was left confused. When she got home, Jillian asked Tom if he believed in things that couldn't be explained. Tom said he didn't believe in anything supernatural. Suddenly, an image flashed in Jillian's mind. It seemed to be her childhood room, with the strange figure hiding in the small closet space. To recall more, Jillian visited her old childhood home, which now had new owners. Jillian sneaked upstairs, hoping to see her old room. The closet was still there, and the wallpaper inside had split, revealing the exact spot where the strange figure had been in her memory. The homeowner interrupted her. After they left, Jillian sneaked back into her childhood room, tore off the wallpaper, and found a blue door with a handprint. She opened it and discovered a corpse inside. When Jillian returned home, she felt uneasy. Suddenly, she realized that the strange figure was staring at her through a crack in the door. She jumped in fear and asked Tom to check it out, but when he went over, there was nothing there. Jillian continued her psychological therapy. She told the therapist that her father had left when she was 8 years old and that the pretzel Jack she had drawn had come to life. The therapist suggested that Jillian's low mood made Pretzel Jack seem more real and recommended medication to stabilize her emotions. Jillian felt her concerns were being dismissed and angrily left. Once again, the lights in the room started flickering. After returning home, Jillian ran into Ivan and thanked him for his concern. Ivan offered to listen if she needed to talk, so Jillian confided in him about the strange figure from the basement who killed Tom's friend. She admitted that she believed she might have created or invited the creature. She explained that this phenomenon had started when she was a child, and the figure was none other than Pretzel Jack. Ivan suggested that Jack might be a protector, attacking Tom's friend to defend her. It seemed as if Ivan was subtly guiding Jillian's thoughts. Jillian then mentioned that she was very angry at the time. Ivan suggested that perhaps her anger triggered Jack's attack on Tom's friend. Realizing this, Jillian rushed to check on her therapist, fearing for their safety. However, she found the therapist unharmed, which brought her some relief, and she returned home. Back at home, Jillian accidentally discovered an audio recording on Tom's computer. In the recording, Sarah was telling Tom to stay away from her family, and there was a child's voice in the background. Once again, the lights in the room flickered due to Jillian's anger. Meanwhile, Tom gave a toy to a child, who happened to be Sarah's son. After seeing the toy, Sarah anxiously took her child away. Tom then returned to the blonde woman's house. The woman commented that Sarah shouldn't treat him that way. Tom mentioned that Sarah's child looked a lot like him. The blonde woman led Tom deeper into the house, where the room was eerily empty. She suggested that Tom could find peace there before leaving him alone. She then went to the adjacent room and began monitoring Tom through a computer. Tom, now completely undressed, was lying in a bathtub. Suddenly, Pretzel Jack appeared beside the blonde woman, reaching for a knife. The woman noticed Jack staring at her, panicked, and grabbed a gun. Jack walked past her and headed straight for Tom. The woman fired at Jack, but the bullets didn't seem to harm him. Jack twisted his body into a bizarre shape, killed the blonde woman, and then turned his attention to Tom, attempting to kill him. In a panic, Tom ran to his car, but it wouldn't start. Just as Jack was closing in, the car finally started, and Tom drove off. But before he could breathe a sigh of relief, another vehicle crashed into his. Seeing this, Jack stopped and walked away, deciding not to pursue Tom further. The scene then shifts to Jillian, who receives a call informing her of Tom's car accident. As she's preparing to go to the hospital, she hears a noise outside and opens the door to find Ivan returning her runaway dog. Jillian invites Ivan in for a chat and tells him about Tom's accident, mentioning that Tom was found naked at the scene. Ivan explained that sometimes rescuers have to cut off clothing to free someone from a car, but Jillian clarified that Tom wasn't wearing any clothes to begin with, making the situation awkward. Jillian also mentioned that it seemed like someone was chasing Tom. Ivan asked if it seemed like what happened to Tom's friend. Jillian responded that it seemed so, and they both realized that Pretzel Jack might have been responsible for the attack on Tom. Concerned, Ivan offered to drive Jillian to the hospital. Afterward, Jillian and Tom thanked Ivan, who then left with a strange expression on his face. After Ivan left, Jillian brought up the topic of sensory deprivation float therapy, revealing that Tom had visited the blonde woman for this therapy. She confronted her husband about why he hadn't told her. Tom admitted that he should have informed her earlier. Jillian then questioned if there were other reasons for his visits, indicating her growing mistrust. At that moment, the police arrived and showed Tom a video mentioning that the blonde woman specialized in postnatal care and that her float therapy was only known through word of mouth, with no deliberate advertising. The police also noted that Tom's number was in the blonde woman's contacts, as well as a linked contact, Sarah. Tom explained that he had done some work for Sarah in the past and suggested that the blonde woman might just be a mutual acquaintance. Jillian was visibly displeased. The police then asked if they recognized the person who had chased Tom. Tom mentioned that the attacker wore a mask resembling a character from Jillian's childhood drawings, specifically Pretzel Jack. However, Tom still didn't believe Jack was real, theorizing that the intruder might have stumbled upon the drawing in their basement and used it as inspiration for the mask. The police questioned why the attacker would target Tom but spare Jillian, hinting that they might suspect Jillian is involved somehow. A few days later, the couple returned home. Tom suggested they should stay at a hotel, but Jillian wanted to show him something. As the camera panned out, we see Pretzel Jack watching their every move from outside. Jack then sneaked into a family's yard, found a hole, and twisted his body into it as if to sleep. Jillian led Tom to the basement, explaining that Jack was protecting her from pain and suffering. She recounted how she would lie awake at night as a child, haunted by terrifying thoughts. After her father took her to a circus, she imagined Pretzel Jack. When her father left, Jack became real, emerging from the wardrobe just like the blue door in their basement. Months later, Jillian and her mother moved out, thinking Jack was just a dream, but now he's back. Jillian then brought Tom to the blue door in the basement, where they found the childhood version of Jack that Jillian had retrieved from her old wardrobe. Despite this, Tom insisted that it was just a madman in a mask, asking if Jack was real, why he would want to kill him. Jillian replied the answer was obvious. With her secret revealed, Jillian hoped Tom would share his own. As Jillian's emotions intensified, she mentioned Sarah's child, causing the lights to flicker. In the distance, Pretzel Jack sensed her anger, opened his eyes, and started heading toward her, something a little girl nearby witnessed. Jillian brought up the child, and Tom explained it was before he and Jillian were officially together. He later found out Sarah was pregnant, but by then, she was married, and her husband believed the child was his, unknowingly raising Tom's child. Considering Jillian's issues with her father, Tom decided not to tell her. Their argument escalated as Jillian became more agitated, and Jack drew nearer. Tom suggested they knew how to solve this without hurting each other, alluding to past conflicts. They decided to go to a place where they wouldn't harm one another while Jack continued to follow them from a distance. The place turned out to be Jillian's therapist's office. Tom admitted his mistakes, hoping to make amends. The therapist discussed the meaning of true love, mutual protection, care, and acceptance. As the therapist spoke, Jillian sensed a connection, realizing that Jack might represent a part of her inner psyche. She believed that everything from her childhood was linked to the present, but Tom insisted Jack was just a dangerous person. He suggested they stay at a hotel for safety. Jillian became increasingly frustrated, feeling they were treating her like a child. The therapist then made an ill-considered comment, saying no one has imaginary friends as an adult. This remark fueled Jillian's anger further. The lights began to flicker again as Jillian sensed something was wrong. Suddenly, there was a noise outside. Convinced that Jack had arrived, Jillian warned everyone. The therapist, still skeptical, tried to prove Jack wasn't real by opening the door, only to find nothing. Just as everyone began to relax, Jack crawled in through the window, contorting his body unnervingly. The therapist, trying to remain calm, ordered Jack to leave the way he came, but Jack stood up and strangled him to death. Terrified, Jillian and Tom fled the scene. As they ran outside, a car pulled up, and Ivan was the driver. They got in, and Ivan drove them back home. Once there, Ivan told Jillian that she had made Pretzel Jack real and that she was special, because Ivan had the same ability. But what did Ivan create? This ties back to an earlier scene where Ivan mentioned imagining a towering figure as a child, taller than any adult. Ivan explained that Jillian needed to stay calm, as stress would summon Jack. He suggested that Jack was Jillian's emotional defense mechanism, a manifestation of her emotions. While everyone has emotions, Ivan and Jillian have the ability to open the door to those emotions, making them real. Ivan theorized that Jack was Jillian's way of protecting herself. Ivan shared a story from his childhood about seeing a brain tumor preserved in a jar at a museum. He compared the tumor to their current situation, with the difference being that their tumors have manifested externally and are running wild. Tom remained skeptical and asked why someone with the same condition would conveniently live next door. Ivan explained that it wasn't a coincidence, but rather that they could sense each other, although Jillian hadn't realized it yet. Jillian then asked why Ivan hadn't told her about this from the beginning. Ivan responded that he was afraid it might scare her, though his explanation felt somewhat forced. Jillian then asked how she could get rid of the pretzel Jack she had created. Ivan replied that she didn't need to physically destroy him, but rather learn to control him. Next, Ivan prepared to demonstrate his abilities. Jillian asked him to create a cat. As Ivan lay on the bed, he began to convulse violently, and the lights started flickering. Suddenly, a wooden door materialized on the wall, and when it opened, a cat appeared. It's a werewolf cat. Ivan told Jillian that she could control this power, and once she mastered it, she could even make the door disappear. This was likely a hint at how to make Pretzel Jack vanish as well. Jillian asked if there were any limits to this control. Ivan explained that, based on his experience, the range was several hundred miles. If Jack went beyond that range, he would either stop somewhere and wait for Jillian to return, or eventually perish from exhaustion. However, this wasn't a real solution, as Jillian could always create something else. She had to learn control. Ivan suggested that they could lure Jack out, trap him, and then practice controlling him. With that plan in mind, they returned to the basement door. Ivan proposed that Jillian needed to experience deep emotional pain to draw Jack out. Tom began describing his time with Sarah, which provoked Jillian and triggered Jack's appearance. Just as Tom was about to give up, Jack appeared at the doorway. At that moment, Jillian's father called, saying he needed to see her in person to discuss something important. Jack bypassed Tom and rushed through the door. Jillian, no longer afraid of Jack, faced him and gently touched him. Jack smiled for the first time, and they embraced, but not for a smelly hormone yoga session. This scene triggered Jillian's memory of the first time she summoned Jack. In the flashback, while she was sleeping, the lights flickered and the camera rotated. When she awoke, there was a blue door in her wardrobe, and inside was Jack, performing contortions and playing with her. In the present, Jack seemed to fall asleep under Jillian's control. Ivan suggested that Jillian needed to train to fully master her ability and ultimately make Jack disappear, warning that when that time came, she might not even want to see him again. While they were still in the basement, Tom heard a knock at the door upstairs. When he answered, it was Sarah, and the two of them started arguing and wrestling with their tongues right in front of Jillian. Her emotions spiraled out of control, causing the lights to flicker again. Jack, sensing her distress, tried to escape the basement. Despite Tom and Ivan's efforts to stop him, Jack found a way out and attacked Sarah, injuring her. Sarah and Tom had no choice but to flee, causing such a commotion that even the police were alerted. The group split into three. Tom and Sarah ran ahead, with Jack in pursuit, while Jillian and Ivan followed the trail of white liquid Jack left behind. Tom and Sarah took refuge in a house, where Tom revealed that everything he had said was true. He still loved Jillian, but was torn because of Sarah's child. However, Sarah admitted she had already done a paternity test, and the child wasn't Tom's. Now, with Jack closing in on them, they had to come up with a plan. After calming Sarah, Tom decided to seek help alone, but he was soon confronted by Jack, and they fought in a swimming pool. Just then, Jillian and Ivan arrived. Ivan guided Jillian to channel all her emotional energy into her hands. As the lights flickered, Jillian felt herself gaining control over Jack, forcing him to release Tom. Ivan then taught her how to crush the energy in her hands to destroy Jack. Jack swelled up, exploded, and dissolved into white liquid. Ivan had helped Jillian eliminate Pretzel Jack, and it seemed everything was finally over. The three of them escorted Sarah to the hospital. Sarah made an excuse to speak with Jillian alone, telling her that the child wasn't Tom's and reminding her that trust can be broken but also rebuilt. It's a choice. After their conversation, Jillian asked Ivan to drive her away. There was a side note here. Jillian's father had visited her home looking for her, but she wasn't there. Jillian asked Ivan to take her to a place which had been established by her father. However, after her father's fall from grace, it had become a ghost town. Jillian decided to learn how to control her abilities, so Ivan took her to his home, which was different from the one he had previously rented. Before entering the house, Jillian threw up, still shaken by everything that had happened. That evening, Ivan hosted Jillian, and after a brief conversation, she went to bed. After Jillian fell asleep, her phone kept receiving messages from her father asking to meet. Ivan saw all the messages. Meanwhile, Tom also received a call from his father-in-law, who said he was waiting at a hotel to discuss something important about Jillian's family. However, Tom didn't answer the call. Later, the father was at the hotel when someone arrived. It was Ivan. Shockingly, Ivan addressed the man as Dad, indicating that Ivan and Jillian were siblings. Ivan told the man that even though he had left Jillian, he wouldn't let her down. Ivan believed that his father had always wanted to cut ties with him, but the man called Ivan a monster and recounted how Ivan had done terrible things since childhood, from making dogs disappear to causing the deaths of school bullies. He warned Ivan not to lead his sister astray. The man's harsh words angered Ivan, who used his abilities to summon the tall man, who then killed his father. Tom arrived at the hotel shortly afterward and saw Ivan leaving. When Tom entered his father-in-law's room, he found nothing. Clearly, Ivan had already disposed of the body. Afterward, Ivan drove off and bought a large number of burgers, which he devoured hungrily. The next day, Jillian woke up at Ivan's house. Ivan made her some herbal tea, and there was an unmistakable brotherly affection in his eyes. They even shared a smelly kiss, with Ivan still in the dark that Ivan was her half-brother, and he had killed their father. At Ivan's house, he began training Jillian to control her emotions and create living beings. With Ivan's help, Jillian tried to imagine a rabbit. A blue door appeared, and out came a rabbit, but it was deformed and hairless, shocking Jillian. The rabbit died immediately after emerging. Ivan reassured her, saying that not every attempt would be successful. He admitted that he had tried many times before successfully creating the dog. It turns out the dog Jillian had been caring for was one of Ivan's creations. Back in her room, Jillian discovered that her phone was broken, clearly tampered with by Ivan. She decided to take a walk and heard a strange noise, which led her to find a dog toy in a cabinet. However, when she touched it, she felt something was off. Later, during dinner, Jillian mentioned that she had a plush toy just like this dog when she was a child. Ivan brushed off the comment. Jillian then asked about Ivan's mother, to which he replied that she had passed away earlier that year. He described her as someone who was too trusting and chose to ignore certain things, creating her own reality. He added that she deserved better. Sensing Ivan's unease, Jillian decided to head home. Meanwhile, Tom called Jillian, urging her to come home soon. He noticed a dog outside that looked remarkably like their own and followed it to Ivan's house. There, he found a jar in Ivan's fridge filled with some unknown meat. Tom then ventured into the basement, where he discovered numerous doors behind some boxes. Inside the boxes were the remains of failed creations, including a dead dog. He also found Ivan's childhood drawings of the tall man, along with family photos, one of which was of Jillian's family. It became clear that Tom had uncovered part of the truth. Jillian and Ivan returned home, only to find that someone had broken in. Just then, the tall man, created by Ivan, emerged from Ivan's car trunk. Upon entering the house, Ivan realized it was Tom who had been there. Tom confronted Ivan with the family photos and asked what he had been doing near Jillian's father's hotel the night before. Finally, Jillian realized Ivan is her half-brother. Feeling betrayed, Jillian accused Ivan of deceiving her, but Ivan insisted that everything he had done was for her and that he had something very important to show her. Ivan led them to a garage filled with dogs he had created, all of them feasting on their father's corpse. Jillian was horrified. After a brief struggle, she decided to call the police. Meanwhile, the tall man watched them menacingly, but Ivan held him back. When the police arrived, Ivan confessed to killing everyone, including his father, Tom's friend, the blonde woman, and the landlord's family. It turned out that Ivan hadn't rented his house. He had killed the owners and moved in. Ivan was arrested, but he kept gazing lovingly at Jillian, telling her that he had done it all for her. After everything was over, Tom told Jillian that he wanted to start a family with her, and the two reconciled. During this time, Jillian created another door, but she wasn't sure what was on the other side. When they opened it, they found a deformed baby inside. Jillian claimed it was their child, terrifying Tom. The baby seemed to be slowly dying, and after a while, it vomited white liquid and died. Meanwhile, Ivan, controlling the tall man, killed 2 police officers and escaped. After Ivan returned to Jillian's house, Tom tried to stop him but was confronted by the tall man who had just killed another police officer. Behind them, a red door appeared, and through it, a figure covered in blood emerged. Meanwhile, Jillian, still grieving the loss of her child, walked downstairs in search of Tom but couldn't find him. Outside her house, she noticed the red door, but it was empty inside. She also saw the body of the recently killed police officer, with a message written nearby telling her to find him at the ghost town. It turns out that Ivan had knocked Tom out and taken him to the ghost town. At this point, Ivan was weakened from overexerting his powers. He told Tom that he loved Jillian with a purer and more genuine love. Ivan also explained that he met Jillian before their father left, and everyone she met afterward made her feel unsafe, which is why she stayed with Tom. He was a safe choice. As Ivan's headache worsened due to his power exhaustion, Tom seized the opportunity to escape, with the tall man in pursuit. Jillian drove to the ghost town, where she encountered a patrol car. Suddenly, children dressed in various colors emerged from all directions and killed the patrol officers. Panicked, Jillian fled, realizing these children were also Ivan's creations. While evading them, she spotted the tall man and followed him, eventually finding Tom in hiding. Tom told her about Ivan's attempts to kill him, so Jillian decided to summon Pretzel Jack to protect them, but she failed. Tom then began acting strangely, repeatedly professing his love for Jillian, insisting that their being together was enough. When Jillian squeezed his hand, she noticed white liquid seeping from his skin, realizing this Tom was one of Ivan's creations. Jillian fled in fear, with the fake Tom chasing her. In desperation, she grabbed a wooden stick and killed the fake Tom. The real Tom then appeared, cutting himself with a nail to prove he was the real Tom. The two embraced without a kiss, and Tom crushed the fake Tom's head for good measure. The next day, the colorful children continued searching for them throughout the night. With no other options, Tom and Jillian hid in an abandoned building. Jillian reflected on the previous night, feeling as if she had truly killed her husband. She wondered if her desire to summon Pretzel Jack to kill Tom stemmed from a deep-seated wish to eliminate the part of Tom that had deceived her. The two decided to escape, but unfortunately, they encountered Ivan again. Ivan suggested that he and Jillian create something together but without Tom around, so he sent the tall man to kill Tom. Once again, Tom and Jillian were forced to flee. During the chase, Ivan collapsed from exhaustion, while Tom and Jillian took refuge in a house. Jillian attempted to summon Pretzel Jack, convinced that he was a part of her. Tom reassured her that he could accept the idea of Jack manifesting to kill him because it wasn't Jillian's fault. He had betrayed her. In this sense, Pretzel Jack was their joint creation. Tom decided to distract the tall man while Jillian stayed in the room, trying to recreate Jack based on her memories. After several failed attempts, Jack finally appeared just as the tall man discovered Jillian. A fierce battle ensued, and Jack ultimately killed the tall man with a chainsaw. Despite the terrifying situation, Jack's smile appeared oddly endearing. However, even though the tall man was defeated, Ivan could still create more creatures. The three of them decided that the only way to stop this was to kill Ivan once and for all. Ian, now desperate, fled to regain his strength by eating. After restoring the tall man, Ivan lured the trio into a house. There, Jillian discovered the body of a woman created by Ivan who bore a striking resemblance to her. She then found Ivan in a room filled with doors of various colors, which he said he had created for her. Ivan asked if she felt the connection between them and why she had never sought him out. Jillian demanded that Ivan control the creations in his mind rather than letting them control him. A fight broke out between them, and during the struggle, the resurrected tall man killed Pretzel Jack. Just as Ivan ordered the tall man to kill Tom, Jillian stabbed Ivan with a knife she had hidden. The tall man charged in to finish Tom off, but instead impaled Ivan, killing him. After Ivan's death, all the doors in the room disappeared. In the end, Jillian and Tom rebuilt their lives. They started a family and had a child who appeared to inherit Jillian's ability to create dream doors. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.